selling a home in 2024, certainly still a seller's market. Certainly all the things that you've heard, right? Lack of inventory, buyers, bidding wars, all of those things will definitely be part of the story. However, I think there's a lot more to it. So we're going to get into it. It may hopefully bring you some insights. And I want you to know that regardless of what I say, it doesn't really matter what I say, what the market is. If it's your time to sell and selling's right for you, that could be in the very worst seller's market there is, which we're not in, or the very best. But the ultimate deciding factor of is it a good time to sell has to do with your situation. So if you have any questions about that ever, I would love to chat with you. We can hash it all out and make sure that you are making the right decision for you, your family, and your situation. As always, I'm Jeremy Kane with eXp Realty. There's definitely a link to book a call with me if you're interested in selling a home, but if not, definitely comment. If I say something that makes you mad, definitely, get those hunters and peckers out there and let me know. If you like something I say, throw me a thumbs up, follow me on all the channels. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, and definitely focus on all things Denver real estate. So let's kind of get into this. And first things first, let's talk a little bit about the market, right? Inventory is quote unquote up from where it was, this time last year, and things were getting crazy. There's houses that have 30 offers and going for well above asking and all of the things. But I don't think we're gonna see that. That's not gonna be quite the norm, I don't think, except for the perfect house and the perfect price point. Mostly what I'm seeing is there's, multiple offers, few offers, one or two offers here and there. We're getting those emails that say, hey, we got an offer, get us your offers by 5 o'clock on Sunday. We'll let you know by 10 o'clock on Monday. So we are kind of in that realm already in January, which I don't know why this surprises anyone. I say that the spring market starts in January, pretty much the first full weekend after the New Year holiday. We're pretty much full swing here in Denver. We get some sunny days, and then we get snowed out and have some snowy days. Last Saturday, we had a big snowstorm. I was out. I showed 7 properties to 2 different buyers. I know there was a lot of people out there doing that because it was supposed to rain and then it snowed like 14 inches. So that's Denver for you. So that's kind of the market conditions, boots on the ground. But let's talk about this as far as the mindset of the buyer, right? You say, well, this is about the seller and all of that. The mindset of the buyer really matters. And buyers are being ultimately much more picky. Costs a lot more. The money costs a lot more than it used to back in the pandemic and beyond years. And so our interest rates actually ticked up, right? There's no realtors out there posting interest rates or anything when they go up, but I am here to tell you they did go up this last weekend. And I think, it's finicky. I think, mortgage applications go up 20% when the market drops a little bit. And then when it goes up, then they drop, 10% or whatever. So I think that the buyers are really paying attention to that. Obviously, the affordability and that stuff affects their monthly payment a ton. Now, what I do want you to hear as a seller is you do have, the option and the power to help sell your home at a much lower interest rate if you do offer concessions and temporary, buy downs on the loans and things like that. And so there is a way to help the buyer out, get into that lower interest rate product by, instead of adjusting your price, giving a seller concession. Now, it does have to appraise and do all of that. But I will tell you, if you are marketing something like that, you're gonna put yourself ahead of the game a little bit because these buyers are so finicky when it comes to being ready, being in the market. A lot of them are shopping at the top of their price point. So a little bit of dip in interest rate raises their purchase power. A little bit of a spike in interest rate, they lose it. So not to say that shopping at the top of your price point is definitely what I tell you to do, but that's the reality of what's going on. So sellers, it's really important to understand that psychology of the buyer and make sure that your home is marketed appropriately and you're making the right moves, because a $10,000 price reduction could mean very little to the bottom line monthly payment of that buyer who first-time home buyer is getting a loan, as opposed to a $10,000 seller concession where they can buy it down, 3/4 of a point or whatever that looks like. And that would have a much larger impact on that monthly payment, essentially financing the buy down into the mortgage. so to speak. So that's definitely something to consider and understand and prepare for buyers to be in and out, right? And it's a weird market. Just this last weekend, one of my mentee agents went under contract. I don't know why they took the offer right away, but they did. And they asked if the buyer would let the seller out of the contract by 8 p.m. the night they went under contract. Fortunately, the answer was no. Signing a contract is a legal document. So as a seller, you do have to make sure you're serious and ready to roll there. But the buyers are definitely in and out, right? And it's not because of anything else besides the pure cost of money that maybe they're not as used to. So that's the first thing. Understand that they are very flighty at this point, especially with when loans are involved and that kind of stuff. And so that's that, right? And so what's the seller dynamics, right? Seller's market, what's that mean, right? Typically it means that a seller's market, and according to the National Association of Realtors, which you can take that or leave it, if we have 6 months of inventory, it's technically a balanced market. We are, even in the high, when inventory really spiked, when demand kind of fell off, we were at 2.9 was kind of the peak of the months of inventory. What that means is if not one house went on the market for 2.9 months, the demand would satiate that and we would have no homes on the market. So according to the National Association of Realtors, you're supposed to have 6 months of inventory to be at a balanced market. I would say that, the tide starts to turn towards the buyers. The buyers have a lot more power when we get to that 2.5 to 3 months of inventory, which we are headed down from at this point now because of the demand and definitely the spike with the low interest rates and the buyers getting out and kind of off the schneid at the top of the year here. So that's kind of what the dynamics of a seller's market is. Now, what that means is very variable, right? A seller's market means, hey, we don't have to do anything at inspection. In Colorado, pretty much, even through the crazy years, if there was something that was massive and a safety concern and would be on any other inspection, sellers were still doing it. Obviously, if you waived the right to object on an inspection, then you could, terminate because you kept that right. In most cases, I never had a offer that was put in that didn't have any right to inspect, but object was definitely something that we played with and tinkered with, but they're protected by the termination. So that's part of, where we're going. I think for a long time in the Colorado market, it's only been the major things that would be considered anyways. I still think that holds true. We aren't seeing as much of the appraisal gap as we saw before. Definitely not seeing, 6 figures over and no, appraisal gap cap or anything like that. Maybe the 5,000, 10,000, that kind of stuff comes into play. But we're not quite seeing that yet from what I've heard so far. Certainly in certain instances when there's 30 offers and undisclosed how high they went over, I'm sure there was some appraisal gap stuff there. So, what that buyer's seller's market even really means is extremely variable there. So the next thing we're going to kind of talk about, and we're kind of picking on buyers, and you're like, this is about the sellers, but the buyers matter, is they are extremely picky right now, right? Because they're paying a premium, monthly payment, so on. The house has to fit the mold. And there's some crazy stat out there that 65% of people that bought in 2020 were unhappy with their purchase. They just got caught up in the market and that's all they could get. And I think that that's important to really note. But right now the buyers are being picky, right? I'm showing houses to people and we're not writing offers, right? It's not the perfect fit. It's not this. And that's again, due to the price that they're paying and also the lack of inventory, right? There's just not a lot of great stuff out there. And if there is, it goes pretty quickly. And so as a seller, you need to do everything you can to get your home as desirable as possible that makes sense. Again, this is very determined on what your situation is. If it's time to sell, if it's, you're relocating, a divorce, a death, or a vacant home or whatever, certainly let's get it on the market and get it marketed and get it sold. You do have a little bit of wiggle room, maybe, fixing up those floors or, doing a little paint or anything like that can help. Fixing out light fixtures. I was at a listing appointment this week where we kind of decided, well, let's get rid of this really old looking floor and maybe throw in some more modern light fixtures, and that would go a long way. And the thing here is the question's always like, well, what's my return on investment? And the truth is that your return on investment is going to be a quick sale for the most amount of money if it's, desirable to more people that walk through. And the only way that we're getting, a ton of interest and a ton of offers, pricing it where it's supposed to be and having it be, more desirable than not. So that's super important, and understand that they're picky, and even some might, ask for more inspection items than might be desired in a quote unquote seller's market, but also understand where they're at and understand that every little bit counts, right? The presentation counts when, they're showing the home. Shouldn't be, the overwhelming dog smell or the overwhelming perfume smell or, air freshener smell. And so all of these things definitely come into play when you're preparing it. When I'm sitting down with my clients as their real estate agent, we're going through it and we're like, okay, let's make it as desirable as we possibly can within your constraints and your time frame and your ability to do what you can do. And so I look at it at a very case-by-case basis, and there's no way that I'm going to say, oh, always do a carpet allowance or always redo the floors. It's going to be somewhere in between, and it's going to be based on what your situation is as a seller. So we sit down, we look at that, I tour the home. I actually don't come with a whole lot of information the first time because I just want to see the house, see what you've done to it or what whoever's lived there's done to it, see any pitfalls or things that come up, and then we're going to make a plan, and I can most likely give you an accurate sales price based on, if you do this, we could probably get this. If you do this, we could probably get this, and kind of go from there. We have a separate pricing strategy meeting because that's just how I roll, and I don't believe in showing up with a, brochure that says this is how much your house is worth when I've never been there. So that's kind of how I do that. And then just understand, and a lot of sellers will be like, well, it's tight inventory, it's a great time to sell. Well, that kind of depends, because tight inventory doesn't mean just unload it. We can't just throw, spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks right now, because the buyers are being picky. They are, up against high costs and that kind of stuff. So those tight inventory issues certainly will help you, right? If you're the only house in a desirable area and all of that, certainly. But just beware that it doesn't even matter, right? If the house and the location and all the things aren't within this person's buy box, we don't see a lot of people extending. So the tight inventory is a thing, but it also can work against us a little bit because we also don't have a ton of comps from the previous 6 months because we're kind of in that stage. And so it's really hard, because if someone sold at a discount in November and December when the market was slow and they just had to get rid of it, that's going to be a comparable, and it might affect your value a little bit. So understand that this tight inventory has kind of two heads, right? We have to have the comparables for an appraisal to come in where it is, unless we get a crazy, response from going to the market and have multiple offers and things, and we can kind of show the market desire. But that's just stuff to keep your eye on, because a lot of people are like, oh, there's low inventory, it's a great time to sell. Not always the case, because depending on your area and your home and the uniqueness of your home, it could be really hard to comp. So that's when you get into stuff that's been sitting on the market a little bit. Someone makes a low offer, and they're like, well, we still don't have comps. And so you really have to be careful with this tight inventory, and it's a tightrope to walk. But again, providing my clients and the appraisers with all the data I possibly can come up with to help them, appraise the home at the value, give them the data they need that works, is absolutely key. So make sure your agent is doing that, meeting with the appraiser if you're selling your home. And then finally, like the implications for buyers, right? Because sellers should become buyers. If they're moving across the country or whatever, they're going to be up against maybe a different market. If they're in the same market, all of this doesn't matter, because whatever you give away on the sale, you're going to gain on the buy, or vice versa. And so that's really important to understand, is where you're going next and why you're selling, because that could change your strategy a ton. And understand that the limited inventory creeps back and rears its ugly head, especially if you're like moving up or looking for the perfect downsize where you have everything main floor living and all of that, more desirable floor plans. You could be going into a completely different competition realm, and hopefully you have a good amount of money and you can come down, you can play the games. But a lot of sellers don't really think that far ahead, and so I like to make sure that we're preparing for what's on the other side, so that we can best position your sale to get you into where you want to go. And then you're not settling on the other side. You're not part of that 65% that were unhappy with their purchase during the pandemic. So that's kind of what I got for you. Understand that certainly, all signs look to a good time to sell in the market. But again, let's look at your hyper-local market. Let's look at what's going on in your neighborhood. Let's look at where you're going, why you're trying to sell, and really make a good strategy to get it done and get it sold as soon as possible for the most amount of money. So if you're interested in that, definitely book a call, the link below, or DM me if you're watching this on Facebook or Instagram, and we will catch you next time. Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you on the YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram. I appreciate you all, and thanks for hanging out with me on my 40th birthday. Bye-bye.